Namaskar, all of you. Welcome to new session. The last session, up till the last session, we were working on pranayam. Couple of sessions were dedicated to pranayam. After having some insight into panchakoshas, pranamaya kosha particularly, and panchakoshas incidentally. Now, I'm just going to make a few concluding points before we end the body of sessions on pranayam. The pranayam in classical approach is not for biological purpose or psychological purpose. Biologically giving oxygenation, exalting the oxygenation and exalting the decarbonization of the system. That's how the respiratory breathing works. We all know that very well. That respiratory system works that way. The pranayam works classically in a different way. The pranayam is not just as a consumer product to give you relaxation of the mind, quietening of the mind, eased out condition of the mind, relaxed condition of the mind, which we all seek after in our pursuit. But classically, the student of yoga, formal student of yoga, knows that the pranayam works in a different way, little beyond this consumeristic aspects. It does work that way, gives you relaxation, quietude, sober, sedate, tender condition of the mind, etc. But it goes beyond, well beyond. That is, the pranayam basically works in two ways, combination of two ways precisely. One is laya. The mind, chitta, must find a locus for laya. It's not just doing an activity of in-breath and out-breath and retentions. But it works for chitta laya, chitta vritti laya, mano laya. The mind must find some kind of locus to get absorbed and not just go on doing activity of pranayam for 10 minutes pranayam, 20 minutes pranayam, 40 minutes pranayam, 1 hour pranayam, which is an activity process. So there is laya. Laya is an important outcome of classical pranayam. The other one is vasana shamana. Vasana shamana, a dispassionate condition, thirstless condition. And you will find quite logicality in the Shastras mentioning these two effects of pranayam. Because for higher aspects, dharana, dhyan, samadhi, which is chitta vritti, the nirodha aspect, the chitta laya is important and vasana shamana is important. And therefore pranayam works in that way that it will give you the condition of manolaya, mind getting absorbed internally. When the mind gets absorbed internally, it will always get absorbed in a sublime, noble, transcendent locus. It will not get absorbed otherwise, internally, in subjectivistic process. Externally, mind can get absorbed into mundane aspects, sensory aspects, bewitching aspects. Wherever you have interest, your mind gets absorbed. Wherever you are well disposed, the mind gets absorbed. Wherever there is sensory gratification, the mind gets absorbed. That is in the external realm. But in the internal realm, the absorption is invariably because of a noble substrate, noble matter touching the chitta. The touchstone effect of noble matter, metaphysical matter, self, Atma, Paramatma. Dev Devata. So these are sublime aspects, support of which gives Chittalaya in the subjectivistic realm, not in psychological realm, but subjectivistic realm. The other one is Vasana Shamana. The Shastras have highlighted this aspect that pranayam works for Vasana Shamana. I recall Yoga Vasishtha has a lot of emphasis on this aspect, how pranayam works on Vasana Shamana. So the passion will be under a spell and passion will be put to sleep, if I may say so. And that is why the Chitta Vritti Nirodha can actualize. So for Chitta Vritti Nirodha, there are two aspects. One is laya, absorption of the mind in a subjectivistic aspect, and vasana shamana, dispassion, thirstlessness coming up. And pranayam works that way. See, when you burn incense in your puja room, it doesn't just spread fragrance, but it also generates sublimity. It generates purity, piety, sublimity. The atmosphere becomes sublime. It's not just the odor, it is not just the fragrance. Similarly, pranayam works like an internal agarbatti. And that's why the atmosphere of sublimity will be radiated. And then under the atmosphere of sublimation, the vasana shamana will take place. And of course also Chittalaya will take place. And then that becomes a portal. Chittalaya and Vasana Shamana becomes the portal for internal aspects of yoga such as Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi. So this is an important point to be noted, that pranayam is not an activity process. Otherwise we all end up saying, I am doing pranayam, I want to do pranayam, I did pranayam for half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour. So we're doing and doing and doing and doing. But the process of it, the process of pranayam results into the Chittalaya. It results into Vasana Shamana. That is why unique state is given by pranayam. That's why pranayam works to burn the doshas of the chitta. Pranayamam daher doshan. The Shastras have said this. What are these doshas? Klesha, Vasana, vrittis, the wandering nature of vrittis, rajasic vrittis, tamasic vrittis. So these vrittis are depleted, decimated by pranayam, reduced by pranayam, weakened by pranayam, enfeebled by pranayam, ousted by pranayam, made to effect a departure from mind. So these things depart from the mind. So this should be noted that the radar of pranayam for a student after a hierarchy must be pointing at chitta laya, mano laya, vritti laya, that is absorption of the mind, and vasana shamana. So this is an important piece of information that I wanted to share in conclusive note. Secondly, pranayam means we think it is pancha pranas. Pran, apan, saman, vyan, udan, 5 pranas. We think pranayam is done with the pancha pranas. That is how it happens for the initiates, the rudimentary raw. And we will also go for a procedure of pranavyanayam, apanavyanayam, samanavyanayam, udanavyanayam. So as I told you, there are 4 pranayamas. So this is how in the initial phase it will take place. But however, in case of a yogi, a proficient yogi, profound yogi, it is different. I would like to draw your attention to one very, very fascinating statement from Brahmopanishad. The Brahmopanishad makes this declaration that the 5 Mahapranas are major motivators of conative organs, karmendriyas. And the 5 upapranas are motivators behind 5 upapranas. So, for a yogi of high order or higher order, it will be more, a pranayam will be not ayama of the pancha pranas as much as ayama of the pancha upapranas. Whereas our pranayam we do on the plane of pancha pranas, pran, apan, saman, vyan, udan. So we work on pancha pranas because we are in very rudimentary phase. But in case of a yogi, a proficient yogi, the pranayam really happens of the nature of upapranayam. So, in one sense, it should be understood that pranayam essentially is upapranayam. The upapranas are behind the cognitive senses. Now tell me, how much do you want to work on cognitive senses and conative senses if you are in pranayam? So you want to make your mind quietened, psychosensory aspects quietened, sublimated, etc. So that is the Jnanendriyas. The Pratyahar also comes in the process, as you very well know. And the Pratyahar primarily deals with Pancha Jnanendriyas. So that's a major targeting point for Pratyahar, and then onwards Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi process. So pranayam, in the classical sense, should be understood that the quintessential pranayam is upapranayam. Although science calls it as pranayam, because it has to come in from karmendriya nirodha, the karmendriya pacification, and then it will be jnanendriya pacification, then it will be mind pacification, then it will be chitta pacification. So, Brahmopanishad says that quintessential pranayam is upapranayam. These upapranas are Naga, Kurma, Krukara, Devadatta, Dhananjaya. And therefore, in case of a yogi, it will be Naga, Kurma, Krukara, Devadatta, Dhananjaya upapranas which are managed primarily. These are upapranas of Mukhya Prana. The prana, the first of the 5 pranas, the prana has 5 upapranas. It is not that each prana has upaprana. It is only one prana that has upaprana. Apana doesn't have upaprana. Samana doesn't have upaprana. Vyana doesn't have upaprana. Udana doesn't have upaprana. It is only prana has upaprana. And yogi primarily works there because he is working on cognitive aspects, because he has to find a way towards pratyahar, and pratyahar is primarily with reference to pancha jnanendriyas, and therefore this technical aspect also has to be understood. Just it's an information for us. It's an information that technically it is pancha upapranas. And while we were dealing with the breath, there are so many things right in the initial sessions. We were trying to figure out the various acts of the prana, the breath. Now, Naga, Kurma, Krukara, Devadatta, Dhananjaya, these are Pancha Upapranas. And these have major functions. Imagine that your system did not have belching. Would you have been comfortable? When you have sumptuously eaten, overeaten, eaten up to brim, you want the belching to come out. Then you feel little quiet, relaxed. That's what the breath does. Mark the breath behind the belching act. Mark the breath behind the act of sneezing. The sneezing is so important. We refer the sneezing to cold. But even when there is no cold, there is sneezing sometimes. When non-lungable matter gets into trachea, then we sneeze very strongly. We sneeze to expel that and prevent it from entering the lungs. So it's a very important mechanism which we have in our system, body system, that there is sneezing. It's not that sneezing will be only characteristic to cold, suffering from cold. Even without cold, you will get sneezing. You must have the sneezing. Otherwise, you will not obstruct the non-lungable matter to enter the lung. And then it will be harmful, non-lungable matter entering the lung. So therefore, we have that act of sneezing. It is such a strong act of sneezing, which is exhalative act, that the velocity of sneezing is said to be like a racer car, nearly 200 to 220 miles or even more. At that velocity, the sneezing takes place. So that's also act of breath. Belching is act of breath. Sneezing is act of breath. Cough is act of breath. The cough is not necessarily a sign of, again, a disease that you say, disease of cough and cold. Even otherwise, we must have this mechanism to have a cough which will clear the throat. So that is also Upaprana Kriya. So sneezing, belching, coughing. So these are also important acts. They are defense mechanism. They are defense mechanism, and they are acts of these Pancha Upavayus. And that means Pancha Upapranas. So the breath also does such important things. You want to swallow something. You want to gulp, swallow. It's a breath act. Watch it. Observe it, testify it. If you are drinking water, you will have to gulp water. Now that's act of the breath. So also when you are eating food, you will have to take the food down to the throat from the mouth. And therefore you will have to do that gulping act, which is again act of the breath. Anyway, so I remember these various acts of breath, and that's why it was an addenda. Anyway, the pranayam here, conclusive note is that primarily it is Upapranayam. Naga, Kurma, Krukara, Devadatta, Dhananjaya, in quintessential pranayam, not our pranayam, but in yogis pranayam, because they will open out the corridors for dharana, dhyan, samadhi. Because Jnanendriya Nirodha is a major corridor for Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So that is one thing. And the earlier thing, that pranayam was for Chittalaya, Manolaya, absorption of the mind, absorption of the psychological mind, mental mind, emotional mind, psychomental mind. That is why you get unique state. If they are not happening, then you won't get the unique state of pranayam. If the emotional upheaval, turmoil or vibration is there, you won't get the effect of pranayam. If psychomental, psychosensory vibrations are there, then you won't get the effect of pranayam. So that's a laya, that's absorption and vasana shamana. And so these were few conclusive points that I wanted to convey to you. With that, we are ending our session on the pranayam. Of course, this is a primary lesson, set of primary lessons that we had in whatever sessions we had, 3, 4, 5 sessions on pranayam or more. It is all primary information. So don't think the whole delineation of pranayam has ended. There is greater depth to pranayam. But in the first reading of our education, this is what I wanted to cover, and I have covered. Now we are going to embark upon a new subject matter. Let me give enunciation to it. Usually, we have only 2 classes of those who pursued yoga. those who have pursuit in yoga, those who pursue yoga, those who practice yoga. So there are a body of two classes. What are these two classes? Either man or woman. Man or woman, young or old, strong or weak, diseased or healthy. So these are body of two classes. Several bodies of two classes. You can try to work on this field project. Man and woman, young and old, healthy and unhealthy, strong and weak, diseased and healthy. Apart from that, there is one more classification. Either the pursuant will be educated or uneducated. Educated or uneducated. Is that right? Apart from healthy, unhealthy, strong and weak, man and woman, etc. Again, we have this additional class of two, that is educated and uneducated. Now, since this is education on yoga, I felt that it is important. So you can imagine how educated person will be learning yoga, how uneducated person will be learning yoga, how uneducated person should be taught, and how educated person can be taught. And there is of course a difference, and therefore we always prefer that somebody is educated rather than not educated. So I want to come to this aspect of education to understand educated and uneducated class. What is uneducated class today? Maybe not sufficiently educated, just schooling, or perhaps even illiterate. In some of the countries and India, you can come across some who are illiterate people, who can't even read and write. So, from illiterate condition, you will have uneducated people who, from illiteracy to not sufficiently educated, or just not even primary education completed, or just completed primary education, which is not sufficient education. When do we say somebody is really educated? What is the convention? When will you say somebody is educated person, somebody is well educated person? When will you say somebody is not sufficiently educated person, or somebody is uneducated person? So try to understand these parameters. You can have a thought process on it and understand this. Now about this education and uneducation, or educated condition, uneducated condition. Now today, when somebody is educated, what is it? Or somebody is well educated, what is it? We have departed from the essential meaning of education. If you go to word education etymologically, philologically, look into dictionary. That you can do on your own. I did not tell you. What is the root word from which education comes? The word education comes. Is it a Latin word, or is it a Hebrew word, or whatever word, and what is its meaning there? So that is one meaning, but now we have gone far away from those meanings in our times. Today education means making someone capable of having an economic activity. The person should become something like ATM machine, and that is by education. By education, you want to make a person ATM, so that means he is earning money. He can earn money. He can be earning money. Because if you are not educated, in present situation scenario, how difficult it is to be really qualified for earning money. So what is education today? It has become is that it is Vyavasaya Abhimukha Shikshana. Our modern educationists have made a big blunder. They want a man to qualify to get a job, maybe a respectable job, have an economic activity or maybe a respectable economic activity. That is why we are giving the education through our educative system. We are not really educating them for the sake of education. So today we have departed from the classical notion, idea behind education. What is educated person today? One who is able to earn money, make living in a respectable way, and in a perhaps with some status as well. An uneducated person will be earning money. Even if he earns money, he doesn't earn money respectfully. So all education today is to make someone better, potent to be economically earning member. That's why we are giving education today. So vocational, it has become vocational, professional, not really education in the classical sense. Now, why I am embarking upon this as students of yoga, we know that yoga has come from time immemorial. Now today we know what is education. What was education 50 years back, 60 years back, 100 years back, 200 years back, 500 years back? What was education? And the present education is a conspiracy of, if I may say so, of the imperial rule. They brought the education and they wanted to educate Indians, and that is why one of the governor generals brought the education into India. And we hail that person because he made Indians educated. Now before that, what was education? So in yoga, pursuit of yoga, there has been these two classes, educated, uneducated. Like other classes, healthy, unhealthy, strong, weak, man, woman, etc. But this factor of education is important to be understood. Macaulay brought education, modern education, in India. They were called Macaulay's improvements. And education was the first thing, most important thing that he did. And he brought this kind of education. And the hidden plan behind it is to wean the Indians away from classical kind of education. And then induct them to this kind of British process of getting educated so that they could get job under British rule. Because Britishers wanted Indians to work in their government, therefore they wanted to bring education, and therefore they brought the kind of education which came to know as Macaulay's reformations, and Macaulay brought this educative system today to us. This was primarily to wean Indians away from their age-long process of education. So before Macaulay, before the modern educative system came in, what was the education? Who educated people means what were they getting education in? So I want you to draw your attention to that, because that education is so important for the spiritual evolvement process. Now, today's process of education really contributes almost nil or perhaps negatively for someone to have spiritual pursuit. It will not incline you for spiritual pursuit, it will also create hindrances, obstacles, inhibitions. Whereas our Shiksha Paddhati was totally different. And what was it? What was that class of educated seekers in yoga 100 years back, 200 years back, 500 years back, 1000 years back, 5000 years back, 10,000 years back, 20, 30, 40,000 years back? Because yoga has come from all that time. So what were educated people then were? Because, say in Patanjali's time, if there was educated, uneducated, two classes, who were educated, in what realm they were educated, is to be understood. And therefore, I am commencing this aspect, because we must have some idea of education in our classical times, before the invaders came to India, before the invaders were in India for 200, 300 years, when there were no invaders, what was the education system? So, I recall, and therefore I am telling you, say even until 1950, about 70 years back, I very well know that in universities, philosophy subject was being taught. And for philosophy, the text was Sarva Darshana Sangraha of Sayana Madhava. Sayanacharya and Madhavacharya. That's a classical text penned down somewhere in the 14th or 15th century. And that was studied in almost up to 1950. And usually it was all by Sanskrit and in Sanskrit. Because from Sanskrit, the students went to learn Darshana Shastras in 1920s and 30s, etc., 40s. And even up to 50, the textbook was Sarva Darshana Sangraha of Sayana Madhavacharya. And it is thereafter, after 1950-51, a sudden slump, and the textbook was of authors such as Hiriyanna, then Dasgupta, who wrote books in English primarily to give information about Indian philosophical systems to the Western world or English-speaking people. So until 1950, 70 years back, it was Sanskrit, the language through which Darshana Shastras were pursued. And now today one doesn't have to opt for Sanskrit to study Indian philosophy. Without Sanskrit, they will study Indian philosophy. So a lot of dilution has taken place. Anyway, if you go back to earlier times, 100 years back, 200 years back, 500 years, 1,000 years back, 5,000 years back, 25,000 years back, what was education? So, then we will understand who were the seekers around Patanjali, were educated. And then, in what realm were they educated? Therefore, in classical times, right from classical times to quite some time, maybe until about 200 years, we had this Sanskrit Pathashala concept. And in Pathashalas, they were learning Indian Vidyas. In Indian Vidyas, there are two classes, Laukika Vidya and Alaukika Vidya. In Laukika Vidya, we learn all these traits of business, occupation, etc. Those are called Laukika Vidyas. While Alaukik Vidyas, it was different. They were studying Vedas, they were studying Vedangas, they were studying Upavedas. So there was a time where you come across mention in the history of our culture that there were what was called as Dashagranthi Brahmana. One who was well read was called Dashagranthi. That means well read in 10 texts. What were the 10 texts? These were 10 texts of 10 Vidyas. What were these Vidyas? The 4 Vedas. Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharvana Veda. 4 Vedas. Then Upavedas. Dhanur Veda, Ayurveda, Gandharva Veda and Arthashastra. So 4 plus 4, 8. And then Itihasa Purana. Itihas means Ramayana Mahabharata. Purana means Ashtadasha Mahapuranas. The Puranas, 18 Mahapuranas, 18 Upapuranas. So one was getting educated in the realm of this. Then came, it was further opened out, the studying Vedas implied studying Vedangas. So there is another classification which mentions about 4 Vedangas and 6 4 Vedas and 6 Vedangas. What are these 6 Vedangas? Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Nirutta, Chanda, Jyotish. So that was another classification of 10. Then somewhere in the Smritis you come across mention of 14. Somewhere you get the mention in particularly Darshanarthi. The Darshanarthi must be familiar with all the 6 Darshanas. So there are Upangas too. Upangas. What are these 6 Darshanas? Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa. So 4 Vedas, 6 Upavedangas, 6 Darshanas, then Itihasa Purana. So here, let me give you some very basic information of Arthashastra. It was one of those Vidyas which was pursued. Now this is not economics. Vernacular people should understand because economics means Arthashastra. But Arthashastra is not just economics. Arthashastra means there are 4 Purusharthas. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. That which is circumscribed by the Artha Purushartha, the Shastra to describe that, delineate the whole Artha Purushartha is Arthashastra. It is not just economics. In economics, you get these some laws of demand and supply and pricing, etc. It's not that kind of economics. It is not proper to translate economics as Arthashastra. And Arthashastra is economics. It is Artha Purushartha Shastra. So that is Arthashastra. Look into Kautilya's Arthashastra. You will know how that Arthashastra is for Dharma Acharana. It is for Dharma. It is to facilitate Dharma, Kama and Moksha, other 3 Purusharthas. So it was coming to support the other 3 Purusharthas, Arthashastra was giving you means for dharma, kama, moksha as well. So that is Arthashastra. So look into Kautilya Arthashastra, then you will have some idea that how that Arthashastra is totally different than modern economics, Western economics. That's about Arthashastra that I wanted to tell you. Now, the first of the Upangas, Veda Upangas, there are 6. Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Nirutta, Chanda. Jyotish. Jyotish means not astrology, but astronomy. For understanding the time determinations, the time concept, depending upon the stellar basis, that is Jyotish Shastra. So just I will like to touch on one aspect today in this session. The first of the Vidyas there was Shiksha. See, today, you will know that we want our children to just pick up to speaking. We want them to speak. That's all. And once they start speaking, we are happy. Now, what they should speak should depend upon their mind, intellectual development, mental, intellectual, emotional development. That's what we think, that they have to improve their IQ, they have to improve their MQ, mental quotient, they have to improve their EQ, emotional quotient, and then they just will be speaking. But in Adhyatma, Vachi karma is one class of karma. Just as for Sharira karma and for Sharira, we do so many things to keep the body healthy, strong, etc. Proof to any problems, like immunity, because we want that immunity to body, etc., etc. So we want health of the body. We do so many things for the health of the body. So also mind. We want the mind to be healthy, and we try to identify the ways and means to keep the mind healthy. Nobody bothers about speech. But there is Vachi karma, a kind of class of act, karma. And in earlier times, they bothered about developing the Vacha. And Vacha is an important agency of karma for mankind. It is a human being who have Vachic karma, not so much to subhuman beings. But human beings do a lot of Vachic karma, and they can improve the Vachic karma. There is a lot of scope to evolve Vachic karma. So the culturing of the very speech is so important, and therefore Shiksha is one of the major important aspects in Vedic studies. It comes right in the beginning. Vedas start with Shiksha. Look into Taittiriya Upanishad, you will get some idea. Shiksha Valli, the opening part of Taittiriya Upanishad, will tell you about it, is Shiksha Valli. And when the children went to Vedic studies, Shiksha was taught to them first. It is so important. That is a kind of Uchchara Shastra. We just want the children to speak. We don't bother about them speaking well, etc. If they speak well and good, otherwise we'll give some oratory exercises and do that. But when it comes to study of Vedas, the Varnochara is so important in Vedas. Otherwise today we'll come across a person who is well read, but his speech is not really clear. His speech is not clear, but he has a lot of wisdom. Because we just want to develop the wisdom and intelligence in our subject. But somebody having clear oration definitely puts an impact. So for study of Vedas, the Varnochara is so important. Utterances, so important. Intonations, so important. So to study or commence study the Vedas, Shiksha was important. Varnochara Shastra. So this Shastra was given by Pingalacharya, an Acharya called Pingala. Pingalacharya formalized the Shiksha process, and it has great depth. It's not just using the oratory parts and speaking clearly, because you can speak clearly, but to chant Vedas, to recite Vedas, you require extra skill in the oratory organs. A good speaker doesn't mean that he will be good in chanting Vedas. To chant Vedas, you must culture your oratory system. The oratory system needs an education actually. It needs an education. To speak, we don't much need education at all. That's why we are not taught to speak. We learn the speech as it comes to us. Today's child, or even we people, when we were children, when we picked up speaking, we just picked up speaking by our ears. And then we started using the oratory organ for our speech. Started calling Amma, Anna, Baba, Ai, Father, Mother. Those were the first words perhaps we started to utter. No education is required to utter Father and Mother, Baba and Ai, Appa and Amma. You don't need education. But in those days, education was basically Vedadhyanam. And in Vedadhyana, it is important to develop speech, educate the speech. And therefore, Shiksha is quite a detailed kind of science which gives education to our speech organ. Without that education, you don't qualify to chant Vedas. Shiksha was the first and foremost. It started, that's why very significant nomenclature, Shiksha. Vernacular people don't mistake it to punishment. Shiksha means Shikshana. Shiksha means education. So it commenced with Shiksha. There is much to tell you about it. In Vedas you have Kramapata, Ghanapata, various pathas are there. And that's how the oral act is educated, oratory organ is educated. Jatapata, Kramapata, Ghanapata. And in Vedic studies, when the Vedadhyayana is done, you must be familiar with all this. I will give you a little kind of, maybe in a sense, ridiculous example. Like we know, we utter a sentence. I am going to Mumbai tomorrow. But then to educate the whole system behind the speech, we'll have to have some exercise. What is it? I am going to Mumbai, I am going to Mumbai tomorrow. I am going to Mumbai tomorrow, I am going to Mumbai, I am going, I am I. Then I am going to Mumbai tomorrow. So this is oratory exercise. So this is how we'll have to do it. We don't do it. We don't need to do it. We must be able to say that I am going to Mumbai tomorrow, that's all. But then if we are made to exercise this way, I am going to Mumbai, I am going to Mumbai tomorrow. Then I am going to Mumbai tomorrow. It's an exercise. So in Vedas, you have these Ganapatas, Kramapatas, Jatapatas, where you will give education to oratory act. And behind that there is your intelligence even. So try to send your intelligence out and mind out and find out, can you do this exercise which I told you. For a simple statement such as I am going to Mumbai tomorrow. So we never give this training. For Vedadhyana, this education is important. So Shiksha is the first one, where we give a lot of education to our oratory organ, oratory parts, and the mind behind it, and the psyche behind it, intelligence behind it. So that's the Shiksha, the first. And Pingalacharya formulated the Shiksha Shastra. And today you can get some introduction to it and understand the scope of this Shiksha by looking into the first chapter of Taittiriya Upanishad. You will understand the depth that it has gone in Shiksha. So sometimes take a fresh reading of Shiksha Valli, then you will have some idea of Shiksha. So with that, we understood first of the Vedangas. Then there is Kalpa, Nirukta, Chanda, Vyakarana and Jyotish. Let's have some introductory education about this, and then you will understand. Now today we all say, when we are in spiritual pursuit, we say, oh, I should have known Sanskrit, I should have known these scriptures. I do not know these scriptures, I do not know Sanskrit, therefore I am at a disadvantage. We know that. So let's try to understand this classical educative process, how it was from Patanjali's time to quite some time up to even in Kali Yuga, our era. That was the education 300, 400, until about 300-400 years back, until about 200 years back, 250 years back. So let's try to understand what is this educated class of people, not in our times, because we are unsuitably educated for yoga or adhyatma. But there was a time when they were suitably educated. Let's try to understand that. So with this, we're just touching on Shiksha. I'm going to conclude this session. Let us try to understand this educative process, education in those classical times. Namaskar, all of you. Thank you very much.